Welcome to Getting to Work. It's the podcast of NCI Works. I'm John Spencer from Starved Rock Media, and today it's all about feeling better with Dr. Kristen Allott. Dr. Allott, how are you today?
I am awesome. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to speak to you.
We need to share some of your awesome as we struggle on a day-to-day basis with who I like to say there's no boring day in radio. Okay. No two are ever the same. There's usually some crisis, whether it's a big news story or some technical issue that we're struggling
Right.
with, or some people drama, there's
Yeah,
something. So,
sure.
and as we do more and continue to try to do more with seemingly our growing limited resources, being at our best all the time is a challenge and something that we kind of have to stay on top of, isn't it?
It's really hard. It's really hard because the things that take care of our brain and body are the things that we're encouraged to not make time for a variety of different reasons, depending on our roles. If we're a mom, we have to take care of the kids. If we're an executive, we have to bring in the paycheck. We have, we just run out of time.
Mhm. And
Right.
frankly, they're hard and not necessarily fun. So we'll save
Truth.
that for a little later,
Truth.
but we'll get some tips today.
Yeah.
And I think if you stick with this, you'll really get something out of it. I know I'm counting on it. But first, let's find out a little bit more about Dr. Allott. Who
Yeah.
are you? How did you get where you are today, helping all of these people around the world?
Yeah, so I'm my training is a naturopathic physician and acupuncturist in the state of Washington and many states around the country. It's equivalent to a primary care physician. So some people know about osteopathic doctors, which are a little different than MDs. And so we're just a little different from those two categories.
Okay.
I have all the diagnostic tools like blood work, MRIs, X-rays, all of that. Mostly, though, I treat people without medication. That's kind of like, let's do the basics before we do medication. I'm not against medication. It's just like, that's not our front line, right? Like,
Sure, that
let's,
shouldn't be the first thing that you default to, right?
or
Is
if,
running out to
or
the
if we
Walgreens. Yeah,
default to it, let's go back and do the basics, right?
right.
And the same is with acupuncture. They have a long 2,000-year tradition of that. So, I'm dyslexic, and so as a dyslexic who struggles to read and write, like I didn't know, but like I figured out early on that I needed sleep and food and exercise, or like I can't spell my name, right?
Yeah.
And um and then I had some exposure to mental health, and so when I graduated, I was like, I'm going to specialize in non-pharmaceutical interventions for mental health. And I thought I was going to see 40-year-old women who didn't want to do Prozac. And I saw people who had lots of meds, lots of therapy, lots of wine, lots of other drugs. and it still wasn't coming together.
Uh-huh.
And I was really interested in the physiology. And when I explained to people how their body works and why food, sleep, exercise, meditation, good relationships, like why these make our lives better, it was easier to do it because there was a it wasn't, well, you have to eat every breakfast, lunch, and dinner because you have to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No, you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner so that your brain can work at its best. Because I don't know about you, but I don't make a living on my body. I make a living on my brain.
Yeah.
And most people do. Even farmers are making a living on their brain. Like, we have to be able to think, and we have to be able to control our fearful brain, our amygdala, our reactive brain. And that is totally set up by how we take care of our body. And
Okay.
so then I got tired of working just in clinical, and I've done public speaking around the world, and I wrote a book, and now I'm just trying to, particularly in this post-COVID world, like, we have to start taking better care of our bodies because we have a mental health epidemic and we have a health epidemic. And so, like, where do we begin with me, right? And everybody's different on where they're going to begin.
everybody's different, but I'm betting that you'll say we all have a whole lot in common too,
Oh,
right?
right. We have to cover the basics, but if I'm like, oh, let's work on your sleep, or let's work on your food, or and like, how do we make that reasonable within the context of your life, right? Like,
Sure.
because
Exactly.
you
Yes.
have to make it reasonable within the context of your life. And there has to be a return on investment to doing that, right? Like, we all know that we need to eat more vegetables. Like, we hear that all the time. But quite honestly, there's not a very good immediate return on investment on vegetables. There just isn't. And so, like,
No.
I don't ever start with vegetables with people, because there's not a fast enough return on investment. That comes later, when we're like, oh, like, I just want to feel good all the time. Right.
Yeah. All right. So here
Okay.
we are.
So
Here
that's my
we are.
background.
All right. Here we are, struggling to keep up with everything that is thrown at us from day to day. We're on some screen, some device for, about 16 hours of every day, it seems like, and sometimes more,
Yeah.
honestly. And that takes a toll on us both mentally and physically, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's what we're doing in between or during those 16 hours. It's not just the screen that's a problem, right? It's that it calls our attention and we forget to do the other things,
Right.
right?
What you're looking at is what happens when we're on the screen.
Right.
Nothing. And often, well, if I hadn't been on camera, that's probably the only thing that's kept me from putting something in my mouth, you know, to
Right.
to eat, right?
Right. Right. Which is awesome that you'll do that. Some people, like, they come in and they're eating literally one meal a day. And I'm like,
Uh,
how are you stabilizing your blood glucose when
mhm.
you're eating one meal a day? Because that means your body has to keep it up. And now it's so great because I can slap a continuous glucose monitor on them. And I was like, so you think you have anxiety and ADHD? And what I see is your blood glucose is too low for almost a third of the day, which means your body's just dropping adrenaline into your system. So of course you're going to have concentration problems and anxiety. So why don't we eat more frequently? And you figured out, like, I can hear, like, oh, if I nibble throughout the day, then I can keep up with the cognitive load of my job. But I
And
bet if you cut back on that, you would struggle.
Well, it certainly does help, but it was also, I was alluding to very bad food choices. Someone here in the building stocks this little box right outside this window that
Yeah.
has all sorts of tempting sugary treats, and so every time you walk by, you reach in and you grab
Uh,
something, and so, oh yeah, no,
so let's talk about that, because this is no, no, no. Like, this is
let's
a
talk about that.
no,
Yeah.
no. This, like, I've worked with companies, and this is, you can change your company culture by talking to that person. Like, have them go get protein bars,
Okay.
right? Because when we eat sugar, when we eat, like, candy, like, those people who have candy jars on their desks, right?
Mhm.
And we're going to get a sugar high for about 30 to 45 minutes. And so if you have something important to do in those next 30 to 40 minutes, that's great. But then your sugar is going to collapse. You're going to get fatigued. You're going to start getting anxious. And we're not hungry. Some people are really not hungry when they get hypoglycemic, right? But when we put some protein in there, like, then with some carbs, so not just a protein bar with no carbs, but like a Cliff Bar. I love Cliff Bars in there. And we
Okay.
just take like half of that, right? You're going to have a slower peak and it lasts longer. And so you're going to feel better, and your brain's going to be optimized for a little longer. So I love, like, nuts and a little cranberries. Like, Trader Joe's has these little nut packs with
Okay.
cranberries in it. That
Sure.
is, like, perfect for people to have good brain function for 2 to 3 hours.
All right. So we need to eat more regularly than we do, probably. We need to eat
Mhm.
better, and we can talk about all of
Yeah.
those. But I think for me at least, it starts with more of that structure and the overall 30,000-foot level of we need to eat more regularly, and we need those 3 meals a day for a reason. Some of us think
Right.
we'll lose weight if we only eat 1 meal a day, but that doesn't often work, does it?
It does not often work. And then there's a lot of people who are talking about intermittent fasting. That's usually the next question, right? Because
Mhm,
we're like, we're gonna stuff our calories into an 8-hour window,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
But what I see when I actually, if people can do that and not eat junk in those 8 hours, because you have to get all your macro and micronutrients in, and you don't have a lot of time to do it. So like a Costco cake isn't helpful. But you laugh, but I've had people come in
No,
there like, but
it's
I'm not
right,
eating outside this 8-hour window and
right,
I'm still
right.
gaining weight. And I'm like, but you said you ate half a flat of Costco cake,
Yeah, it's true. It was
right?
there. It was there. And
Right.
I only had a small window to eat, so I
Yeah.
ate
And
it.
it was delicious, right? And I
Yeah.
don't want to feel deprived. And so, like, intermittent fasting works for some people, but not if it sets up binge eating, and
Mhm.
not if you're, and it should be set up for in the morning. So you, from like 7, I like people to just start like, how about 7 to 7? Like you eat somewhere between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and then you stop eating. Because we
Okay.
love to binge eat at night. But what people do when they do intermittent fasting is they like start at 5 and end at 10 p.m.
Uh-huh.
and
It, yeah,
then they wonder why they're getting bad evaluations at work, and they hate their people
sure.
that they're working
Well,
with,
right.
because their brain has nothing to work with.
They're fueling their personal lives and feeling good in the time when they probably would be feeling good anyway because it's their time.
Right.
And then miserable at work and anxious and cranky and all of the things. And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily because of the people they work with or their
Right.
boss or how much they get paid. It's because
They're
of
losing weight.
their eating. Wow.
Right. Like we have to be
Yeah.
careful, because our brain doesn't evaluate when we're doing a weight loss program. We often don't evaluate the secondary consequences.
Mhm.
And it's, and I don't want to make this about weight loss, but it's a little tricky to lose weight without making yourself emotionally and physically miserable.
I
So
can, yeah, I don't like to deny myself anything, and
yeah.
that's part of the reason why I've gotten,
Yeah.
into the shape of, a lowercase d or b, depending on which one you're facing. But it really can start with some small things, setting up your day so that you're eating those
Yeah.
3 meals, and
Yeah.
then, like you say, instead of, the bags of M&Ms in the little
Yep.
basket over there, maybe some protein bars or some nuts and berries and more
Berries. Yeah.
healthful snacks.
Yeah. So when people come to me and they're like, I'm really fatigued, I'm really anxious, I'm really depressed, like my first experiment is I want you to eat something every 3 hours. So you have breakfast and every place has to have protein in it. And so breakfast, a couple of eggs and a piece of toast and maybe a piece of fruit or a veggie, right? Like we want to get our protein, fat, carbs, and fiber. That's a meal.
Mhm. Okay.
And so the eggs, like eat real eggs. Memo is that egg yolks are not bad for you. Eat real eggs.
Okay.
Um, and
This week.
yeah. And so let's say that's at 7. And then at 10 o'clock, have a handful of nuts with some cranberries in it. And then lunch can be at noon and you can have a turkey sandwich, right? Maybe a little side salad or peanut butter or jelly sandwich. I don't really care. But because we're just trying to make you feel better. Like, can you feel better, right? Same thing. Then okay, noon you had lunch, 3 o'clock, you're going to have another handful of nuts, or have a handful of nuts and some cranberries before you go home, particularly if you have kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? Because the transition's awkward. Like you're tired, your brain is tired, you're hypoglycemic. They probably, and you're like, I don't want to eat right before dinner. I'm like, no, you're not eating right before dinner. You're eating so that you have a stable brain to deal with the chaos of going home.
Mhm.
And then you're going to have dinner. And again, you're going to have like a piece of meat the size of a deck of cards, and then whatever else you put with it. We're not cutting out carbs in this experiment. We're just eating protein every 3 hours. And then if you have sleep problems, we're going to do a spoonful of peanut butter or a little piece of meat right before you go to bed. So you're fueling your brain for
Mhm.
while you sleep. And if people do that for 3 days, generally what they notice is their energy goes up on like on a scale of 1 to 10. So let's say they're at a 6, which is almost not functional.
Okay.
If they do that, they'll pop up to at least an 8.
Wow.
And
Just by doing that.
just by doing that, just by eating consistently and making sure that your blood glucose is stable, and we can put a link on to like the video to explain all the
Yeah.
physiology,
Yeah.
which I'm not going to do right now, but like just by doing that, we can, and particularly anxiety, but it works for fatigue as well. Like anxiety, you're definitely going to drop it by at least 3 points. So if you're running at like just below a panic attack, which would be a 9, you're going to drop it down to a 6. That's still going to be uncomfortable, but it's manageable.
Much more manageable. Yes.
Much more manageable. And then if you're working with a therapist who's teaching you some cognitive behavioral tools, like then you can use those. But when your body's like, there's a bear in the room, like it's really hard to convince it otherwise.
You're right. There did. Yes. There's a bear. You're right.
Right. And so like that's one of the quickest return on investment experiments that I have, that people like in 3 days, and then they're like, oh, this helps, and it's a pain in the ass because I have to like get it organized. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's different, but
Mhm.
now you have a tool that you're in charge of, and
And
it's a matter of doing some planning. But all of the things that we need to feel awesome is a matter of doing some planning and getting some support to do it.
so if we have the regularity, if we have the schedule, and those of us who like to have some sort of schedule, this will definitely work and play out. But
They love it.
yeah, then there are also times when, the bear barges into the room in the middle of the day. And
Yeah.
there are some people I know who are stress eaters
Right.
and immediately make their way back to the little basket that has the candy in it every time something goes sideways.
Yes. And the stress eating, if we add protein to that stress eating, so it sounds like you have a bowl of M&Ms. Awesome. Right? You have a bowl of M&Ms. But you could also get one of those packs of peanut butter that, you just squirt in your mouth kind of thing. Or I just have peanut butter jar in my office and I'm like, right. And there's a handout on my website about planning for your terrible, horrible, no good day. Because guess what? I'm short one. Like I haven't had one in 30 days. Right? Like
I could loan you a couple, doctor.
they're predictable, right? But if you ask most people when they know that they're getting into a stressful day, I'm like, do you brush your teeth? And they're like, yeah, of course.
Mhm.
Do you put on clothes? And they're like, well, of course. Right? Like
Crazy.
we have certain rituals that we do to take care of ourselves, even in the worst of circumstances.
Mhm.
And we as a society don't prioritize feeding ourselves or feeding ourselves the food that will help us. So for stress eaters that are like sugar, 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 they're actually just trying to stay in their smart brain. It's actually a great technique. They will be able to tolerate longer windows without food if they add that peanut butter, if they add a little bit of a piece of meat with it, and be like, I'm always going to pair carbs with protein.
Okay. You have lots more information on your website. It's fuelyourbrain.org, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. And it's free. We don't get ads. We don't get money. Like we just want people to use the information.
You are all about helping people, and you've got some really useful things there, including a link to the book,
Yep.
which I know you've helped lots of people with that too.
Fuel Your Brain, Not Your Anxiety, published by New Harbinger. I was very happy to get a real publisher to because you
Not one
can
of those
self
fake ones.
well, it was, the first time you do a book, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, and it was nice to walk through with somebody who's done it a lot.
And you'll find the book Fuel Your Brain wherever fine books are sold.
Exactly.
Of course, the link is there at fuelyourbrain.org. Doctor, I haven't had sugar in about 25 minutes, so I'm
Oh.
about ready to crash. I need to go. But thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time as well. And the best of luck. I love independent radio. It's really important that you continue to exist.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate the support. We're blessed with a great team here and a great community that is still very much dependent upon and supporting local radio. So
Yeah.
as long as we have that symbiotic relationship, we provide what they need, they provide what we need, we'll be able to continue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you.
Take
And
care.
protein bars. Got it.
Protein bars.
Protein bars. Got
Thank
it.
you.
Dr. Kristen Allott on this edition of Getting to Work, the podcast of NCI Works. For other podcasts in this series and everything work in North Central Illinois, go to nciworks.org.